You worked for it for years. Maybe it was a promotion. Maybe it was a degree, a body, a number in a bank account, or a relationship you had been trying to build. And then it happened. The thing you were waiting for finally arrived. For a few days, maybe a week, it felt like you expected. You felt something real, something that mattered. And then, slowly, it stopped feeling like anything. The promotion became just your job. The degree went on the shelf. The number became your new normal. You looked around and thought, now what? Or something worse. Is this it? If you have ever achieved something important and felt not happiness, but a strange, quiet emptiness, you are not broken. You are not ungrateful. You are not doing ambition wrong. You are experiencing something that psychology has studied for decades, and understanding it will change how you think about every goal you set from this point forward. And why that might not be a problem at all. Let me begin with a story. In the early 1990s, a young man was one of the best squash players in Israel. He trained every single day. He gave up weekends. He organized his entire life around one goal: to win the Israeli National Squash Championship. And he believed, completely, totally believed, that when he won, everything would change. He would feel happy, complete, at peace, finally free from the pressure that had followed him for years. At the age of 16, he won. He stood there with the trophy. And the feeling he expected, the relief, the completion, the happiness, did not come. What came instead was something he later described as a deep emptiness. Like he had been running toward a door his whole life, finally opened it and found nothing on the other side. That young man was Tal Ben-Shahar. He went on to study psychology at Harvard University. His course on happiness became the most attended class in the university's history. The experience with the trophy stayed with him throughout his career. He spent years trying to understand what had happened, not just to him, but to everyone who had ever reached a goal and felt, unexpectedly, less than they expected. He gave it a name. He called it the arrival fallacy. The arrival fallacy is the false belief that reaching a specific destination will produce lasting happiness. The belief that when you get there, to the promotion, the degree, the relationship, you will finally feel the way you have been imagining. The fallacy is not about the goal being wrong. The goal may be completely right for you. The fallacy is about what you assume will happen when you arrive. Here is what neuroscience helps explain. When you are working toward a goal, your brain releases dopamine, a chemical connected to motivation and pleasure. But the important detail is this: dopamine is released not when the reward arrives, but when the reward is expected. The anticipation of achieving the goal often feels better than achieving it. The planning, the working, the imagining, all of that generates real emotional energy. When the reward finally comes, the dopamine has already been released. The arrival feels quieter than expected, not because the achievement was wrong, but because the brain had already moved on. Think about someone I will call Lucas. Lucas spent 3 years working toward a promotion at his company. He arrived early. He stayed late. He took on extra projects that nobody asked him to take. When the promotion was finally announced, he went home and opened a bottle of wine. He texted his family. He felt genuinely happy. That was on a Tuesday. He remembered standing in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, thinking, I should feel more than this. By the following Monday, he was already thinking about the next level, not because the promotion had failed, but because the brain that had been reaching for something for 3 years now had what it was reaching for and needed somewhere new to go. He did not think, something is wrong with me. He thought, I need a new goal. That is not a character flaw. That is a brain doing exactly what it was built to do. But here is what science found when researchers decided to measure this effect not with stories, but with numbers. In 1978, Philip Brickman and colleagues at Northwestern University published a study called Lottery Winners and Accident Victims: Is Happiness Relative? They interviewed three groups of people. The first group, people who had recently won large lottery prizes. The second group, people who had experienced serious accidents and were now paraplegic. The third group, ordinary people, a control group. The question they asked each group was simple. How happy are you now? How happy were you before? And how happy do you expect to be in the future? The results surprised almost everyone. The lottery winners were not significantly happier than the control group, and the paraplegics, people who had lost the ability to walk, were not significantly less happy either. Both groups had returned, over time, to roughly the same level of emotional well-being they had before their life-changing event. This finding became one of the most discussed results in the history of psychology. It suggested something counterintuitive, that major life events, both very positive and very negative, have less permanent impact on our happiness than we assume they will. This is the mechanism that Brickman and his colleague Donald Campbell had named in 1971 the hedonic treadmill. Each person has a baseline level of happiness, a default emotional state that is relatively stable over time. Positive events lift us above that baseline. Negative events push us below it. But over time, we adapt, and we return to where we started. Like a treadmill, we can run faster, achieve more, accumulate more. But the ground keeps moving beneath us. We end up in roughly the same place. This is not pessimism. It is how the brain was built. The adaptation mechanism exists because novelty requires attention, and familiar things do not. Once your promotion has become your daily reality, your brain no longer needs to track it. It can spend its energy on the next challenge. The treadmill was never designed to give you a destination. It was designed to keep you moving. Vocabulary pause. 3 words from what you have just heard. The first, arrival. An arrival is the moment of reaching a place or destination you have been moving toward. You arrive at an airport. You arrive at a conclusion. You arrive at a goal. In psychology, arrival refers to reaching a desired outcome. The important thing about an arrival is that it ends the journey. And as Ben-Shahar found, for many people, ending the journey is the problem, not the solution. The second, fallacy. A fallacy is a false belief, especially one that seems logical but is not. We call something a fallacy when the reasoning appears to make sense but leads to a wrong conclusion. The arrival fallacy follows a logical pattern. I want to be happy. This goal will make me happy. Therefore, reaching the goal will make me happy. Each step seems reasonable, but the conclusion is wrong, not because the goal is bad, but because the brain does not work the way the logic suggests. The third, anticipate. To anticipate something means to expect it before it happens. When you anticipate something positive, your brain begins to respond emotionally before the event occurs. This is important because it helps explain why the real achievement often feels less powerful than the imagined one. The brain has already rehearsed the feeling many times. By the time the moment arrives, it is already familiar. Arrival. Fallacy. Anticipate. Now here is what makes this specifically harder for ambitious people than for anyone else. Anyone can experience the arrival fallacy, but ambitious people experience it more intensely and more frequently. There are 2 reasons for this. The first is simple. Ambitious people set more goals, which means they experience more arrivals, which means more opportunities to discover the gap between what they imagined they would feel and what they actually feel. The second reason is more interesting. Ambitious people tend to organize their identity around their goals. The goal is not just something they want, it is part of who they are. The person preparing for a promotion does not simply want a promotion. They are someone working towards something. That direction is part of their sense of self. And when the goal is achieved, something unexpected happens. The version of themselves that was defined by working toward the goal, that person no longer exists. Think of someone who spent 4 years as a student, every decision organized around graduation. The late nights, the exams, the applications, all of it pointed toward one moment. When the diploma finally came, there was pride, but there was also something no one had named for them, not emptiness exactly, a question. Who am I now that I have this? Ben-Shahar described it this way. The most dangerous question for ambitious people is not what do I want to achieve, it is what will I feel when I achieve it? Because the answer to the second question is almost always different from what they imagined. The feeling arrives, but it is smaller, less permanent, less complete. And so, quietly, they begin building toward the next goal, not because the first one failed, but because the brain has already adapted. The treadmill has already moved. Vocabulary pause. 3 more words. The first, hedonic. Hedonic comes from the Greek word for pleasure. In psychology, hedonic refers to anything related to our experience of pleasure or satisfaction. Hedonic adaptation is the process by which our emotional response to something pleasant gradually decreases over time. What was exciting becomes ordinary. Not because it became less valuable, but because the brain has adapted to it. The second, adaptation. Adaptation is the process of adjusting to a new situation until it feels normal. In biology, species adapt to environments over generations. In psychology, individuals adapt to circumstances, sometimes within days. The key insight from Brickman's research is that human beings are extraordinarily capable of adapting to both positive and negative things. A new apartment, a new income, a new achievement, all of these over time become the new normal, and the emotional charge they carried fades. The third, baseline. A baseline is a starting point, a stable reference level used for comparison. In the psychology of well-being, your baseline is your default level of happiness, the emotional state you return to after significant events. Research suggests that each person's happiness baseline is relatively stable. External circumstances can shift it temporarily, but the pull back toward baseline is consistent and strong. Hedonic. Adaptation. Baseline. But if the treadmill is how the brain is built, what can actually be done? Here is the important thing. The hedonic treadmill is not a trap you are locked inside. It is a default setting, and default settings can be changed. What research in positive psychology consistently shows is that certain types of experience resist hedonic adaptation. They do not go flat the way achievements do. They do not trigger the same rapid return to baseline. These experiences share something in common. They are not outcomes. They are ongoing. Meaningful relationships do not adapt the way objects do. The value of a deep friendship tends to stay, or grow. It does not become ordinary in the same way. Work that feels purposeful, that connects to something larger than a result, sustains its meaning across time. The experience of growing, of becoming, adapts more slowly than the experience of having arrived. The difference that Ben-Shahar emphasized is between process and outcome. The person who finds satisfaction primarily in outcomes in arriving will always be vulnerable to the arrival fallacy. Because outcomes end. A musician who loves playing is not finished when the concert ends. A writer who loves writing is not done when the book is published. An ambitious person who finds meaning in the work itself, not only in what the work produces, has something that no achievement can take away. This is not a rejection of ambition, it is a refinement of it. Ambition towards something meaningful, combined with the capacity to find value in the journey, not only at the destination, this is what the research points toward. A more sustainable relationship with achievement. Not less ambitious, differently ambitious. Vocabulary pause. 3 final words. The first, process. A process is a series of steps or actions that lead toward a result. In everyday English, we talk about the process of making something, learning something, or building something. In the psychology of achievement, process refers to the ongoing experience of working toward a goal, not just reaching it. The daily practice, the small decisions, the gradual progress. Ben-Shahar's insight is that the process, not the arrival, is where most of the real value lives. The second, contentment. Contentment is a quiet sense of satisfaction with what is present. It is different from excitement, which is intense, temporary, and driven by novelty. Contentment is calmer and more stable. In research on hedonic adaptation, contentment is one of the emotional states that resists the treadmill effect most effectively. Not because it is more intense than excitement, but because it is rooted in meaning rather than novelty. The third, meaning. Meaning is the sense that something matters, that it connects to something larger than the immediate moment. Research consistently shows that meaning adapts more slowly than pleasure. A relationship that is meaningful today tends to remain meaningful tomorrow and next year. Work that feels purposeful does not lose its value after a single success. This is why meaning, rather than achievement alone, is what research most consistently connects to lasting well-being. Process, contentment, meaning. So, why are ambitious people never satisfied? Not because they are broken, not because they want too much, and not because they have failed to achieve enough. They are never satisfied because the brain was not built for permanent satisfaction. It was built for adaptation, for curiosity, for the drive to keep moving. The hedonic treadmill is not a character flaw. It is the cognitive mechanism that made human beings the most goal-oriented species on the planet. The ambition that sometimes feels like a burden is the same capacity that built everything you have. The question is not how to eliminate it, it is how to relate to it differently. When you understand the arrival fallacy, you stop waiting for the moment of arrival to feel complete. When you understand hedonic adaptation, you stop interpreting the emptiness after an achievement as evidence that something is wrong with you. You are not broken. You are running on a treadmill that was built for survival, not for peace. But you can choose where you run, and you can learn to find something in the running itself, not only at the destination. That is the invitation. Not less ambitious, more present inside the ambition. Before you go, I have a question for you, and I want you to answer it in English in the comments. Think of one thing you achieved, something you worked hard for, and remember what you expected to feel when you got there. Was the feeling what you imagined? Just one sentence, in English, in the comments. I will read them. This was Lumina Slow English. Thank you for spending this time here, and I will see you in the next one.